Okay, happy Halloween. The trade deadline has come and gone, and we got some action. Not crazy action, but a lot of trades. Washington, Chicago, the 49ers, as well as Minnesota got themselves a quarterback. We will dive into it all. Have a good Halloween. But first, subscribe to the podcast wherever you may listen. Go to Apple. Go to Spotify. We have you covered. 3 and Out Podcast with me, John Middlekauff. If you're watching this on YouTube, hammer that like button, subscribe to the channel. You guys know the drill. Leave a comment below. Share it with your friends. Share it with your enemies. TheVolume.com. We also have you covered with fantastic merch. TheVolume.com. Go check it out. 3 and Out. We have hats. Before we dive into some of my thoughts and takeaways from the trade deadline, let's start with my friends at Gametime. Do you want to go to a game? Do you want to go to a concert? Do you want to go to a comedy show? Do you want to get out of the house? Like, are you taking your son, your daughter, walking around for trick-or-treating and realize, God, I got to get out. I'm working from home or I'm always in the office. I need to get out and have a good time. Well, we have you covered. The official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime. Go to your smartphone, download the app, and when you sign up for a pair of tickets, any tickets, college, pro, football, basketball, World Series, almost over. If you live in Arizona, you want to catch a game on Wednesday, go do it and do it on us. Promo code John. Use the promo code John. $20 off. $20 off. Cannot recommend them enough. Again, Gametime app, promo code John, get you $20 off your first pair of tickets. Use it. Tell your friends to use it. Tell your family to use it. We don't even need to thank you. Just hammer that promo code, Gametime, promo code John. Okay, the trade deadline is over. And I think from a big picture standpoint, wasn't as crazy as it has been in years past. I would say there was no Christian McCaffrey or, future Hall of Famer Von Miller on the move in this deadline. And I think a lot of times in this modern day NFL with these aggressive GMs, we do see a lot of deals happen in the offseason, right? A lot happened during March. That's when Tyreek was traded. That's when Devontae was traded. We've seen big ones happen during August. Khalil Mack. This one, I would say, was not as crazy as many people thought it had a chance to be. Part of that, I think it's a really good draft class, so teams are less likely, to deal. One of my bold takes last week is I thought a player would get traded for a first-round pick. Well, that would have to be, an Aaron Donald type guy, and clearly teams are hesitant to put them on the market. The Giants, I thought they should have thrown out Saquon Barkley there. The Raiders, who Adam Schefter earlier reported a better chance of hell freezing over than Devontae Adams being traded. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand that. This is not the NBA where you tank, but it's pretty clear when you're not good. Because all these teams that will continue to lose, they are trying to win, right? In the NBA and in baseball, it is easy to tank. That is not the way it happens in football. Coaches try, players try, non-guaranteed contracts. But if you suck, you suck. And let's start with a team who's terrible. And today, to me, the craziest move of the trade deadline, I don't even think it's debatable, is the Chicago Bears throwing their hat in the ring again. They did it last year, and they did it again this year. Now, I'm all for trying to improve your team. But when you are 2-6, your starting quarterback has an injury where he's going to be out several games, you are playing a guy that even diehard football fans couldn't point out of a lineup, is from Division II, and you are going to consistently lose. Trading a second-round pick, and many people, contract negotiators, general managers, coaches don't quite value picks like people in the front office do, but they will tell you the most powerful picks are usually second-round picks. Why? Because you can get impact starters for a very, very cheap wage, right? If I'm getting an impact starter in the top 10, I'm still paying for it. Google how much the guys that last couple years have been drafted at pick 3, at pick 6. They still make a lot of money. When I get Nick Chubb or Joey Porter Jr. early in the second round, I get a plug-and-play starter at a very, very cheap salary. And that is the key to building a really good team, having star players who don't make that much money. And the Chicago Bears, who are going nowhere fast, last year to me was even more baffling because they traded for a complete headache who was never going to work, did not work, who they had to tell to stay away in Chase Claypool. This year they trade for a good player. Sweat is a good player. But you're 2-6. And you're basically just trading a second-round pick, which easily could be pick 33 or 34, like you were trending to compete for the number 1 overall pick, for the right to sign the guy. You're not even guaranteed to sign the guy. And you're going to have to overpay no matter what. Well, you easily could have overpaid just when he hit free agency and kept the second-round pick. There's a reason when you first start buying a home, right? Or if you buy more real estate, people tell you, put down, if you can afford it, as little as possible. You would much rather put down 10% than 50%. Why? You can use that other 40% to buy other shit. So you're going to be in the position, because you have this cap space, to pay for a player like Sweat this offseason, which you probably have to overpay because typically that's how it works in free agency. To give up your second-round pick just for the right to also be in that position does not make sense. Now, people with Chicago, if you're going to be a diehard, I don't know how you could support this administration, would say, Middlekauff, you own his rights now. Well, you own his rights to what? Franchise tag him, extremely expensive, or to extend him. And to me, you could have easily bought him this offseason if you truly wanted to, like they did with Edmonds this offseason, where they overpaid. Think about last year. They trade away Roquan Smith. Right now, granted, Roquan kind of wanted out. Roquan makes $20 million a year. Meanwhile, Edmonds makes 18. So it's not like you were uncomfortable paying a lot for a star linebacker, and there's the gap between those two players is wider than the Grand Canyon. I just can't fathom when you're clearly not good. It's one thing when you're kind of in no man's land, like Minnesota. You're 4-4. Your star quarterback has a torn Achilles. You're definitely not going to wave the white flag yet. I understand trying to do something, even though it didn't cost anything to get Joshua Dobbs. This one, for the life of me, when you just did this last year, you traded such a valuable pick who literally netted the Pittsburgh Steelers, Joey Porter Jr. Like, do you think the Chicago Bears, if they would have a redo, would rather have Chase Claypool, who's not even on their team anymore, or Joey Porter Jr. to go with Jalen Johnson, who they ended up not trading, and then maybe you build around those two? Maybe this offseason, Jalen Johnson leaves and you receive a comp pick because he gets paid. I just don't understand Ryan Poles. I do not get it. And I'll give a slim margin for the chance that the ownership is involved with this, though I have a hard time seeing this or that. The McCaskies, like, I don't know. I think this is Ryan Poles trying to be super aggressive. He'd go, well, John, we got extra first-round pick from Carolina. Those picks, we got wiggle room. We could trade back if we want to do with one of those, get more picks. All that's true. And you also could still sign Sweat this offseason and still have that second-round pick. To hell, maybe use in a trade, maybe use on a player, maybe use to trade back. Keep your options open. Nothing you want to do more than when you suck in sports is to limit your options. It makes absolutely no sense to be giving away premium assets. Totally understand if they traded away even a third-round comp pick, right? Like the 49ers did, who we'll get into a second. I'd be like, listen, you're definitely not one player away, but I'm not going to quibble over pick 96. Pick 33 or pick 34. Google the history of high second-round picks, who they turn out to be. The Bears, last time I checked, are very, very talent depleted. Like, you look at their roster, it's not any good. And like I said, this guy's going to be a free agent who you're going to have to overpay no matter what. Just because he's now on your team doesn't mean the agent's like, you know what? Kind of like that you traded a pick for us. We'll give you a little cheaper deal. Hell no. I saw Michael Lombardi tweet this out earlier today. Now the agent, when it comes to the Bears, has all the leverage, has them by the balls, right? And typically when you think about some of these star players, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Khalil Mack, those agents are complete control, right? Once you trade 2 1s for me or a 1 and a 2, you have to break me. Jalen Ramsey, Jamal Adams, you're going to break me off. It's a no-brainer. It's like everyone's already acknowledging what's going to happen. In this case, when you don't trade to extend them, and even then, why do you need him this year? Like, what's he actually doing for you? Making a few extra tackles for your defense as you're losing by 20 points? I don't see how any person with common sense that follows the National Football League, whether you work in it, whether you're a diehard fan, whether you like the Bears, whether you like the Pack, I don't care who you like, can look at this trade and not go, that's some of the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Makes no sense. I don't get it. I think that is terrible, terrible. Just team roster management. Ryan Poles strikes again. That is, for as good as his trade was with the Carolina Panthers, that's a fleecing. The move for Chase Claypool and this move almost neutralize it and make it equal. I can't wrap my head around it. Like the 49ers, who's a guy in the league texts me, why are they doubling down on a position that's already a strength? I'm like, have you watched the Niners lately? And have you watched the Niners this season? Their defensive line is underachieving. Nick Bosa is nowhere near playing at the level of the other star players that he's now higher paid than. Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, obviously Parsons. All the edge players in this league are dominating, and Nick Bosa has been underwhelming. Could be the defensive coordinator, could just be he's rusty with no training camp. I don't know, but it hasn't been good. And the rest of the group is not playing well enough. They've already traded for Randy Gregory, trading for Chase Young, who I did a little digging with some of my NFL friends. Like, give me the scouting report. Obviously, he's much more of a power player than a speed player. But the Niners need, like, people are running it down their throat right now. They need more power up front. But here's my thing. I wouldn't have loved trading a second-round pick for this guy, even if your pick is pick 55. It's like, well, you're probably not going to re-sign him. I don't know, man. Short term. Thing with trading last year, a second, a third, and a fourth for Christian McCaffrey is he was under team control. So, and at the time, I thought it was kind of crazy. 17 straight touchdowns later, maybe not that crazy. But he's also, you don't have to pay him. He's just on your team for the foreseeable future. They gave up a third-round comp pick. Never forget, the 49ers took advantage of the minority compensation with draft picks, unlike any other team. From Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel's dad is black, Rand Carthen, the GM of the Titans, Martin Mayhew, the GM of Washington, D'Amico Ryans. For all the picks they lost during Trey Lance trade, which is clearly one of the worst trades of all time, they got back like 40 third-round picks from all these guys becoming head coaches and general managers. So to trade pick, let's just say it's pick 100 for half a season of Chase Young, the Niners literally took their starting kicker with that pick last year, which is more than up for debate whether that's good enough. But, like, that's just a proper amount to give for a guy that could help impact your team. To give up pick 34 for Sweat, even though Sweat is better than Chase Young, I can imagine a ton of teams that wanted Sweat, like good teams. I would imagine the 49ers were interested. Hey, we'll give you a second and a fourth, or, Seattle or whoever. You look around the NFL willing to give up their second-round pick and maybe a fourth or fifth. And Washington keeps hanging up on them. Yeah, it's just not good enough. And they're thinking to themselves, like, I think we're giving you a lot. And it turns out they got pick 34 in the hopper. No shit. I mean, these other teams, once they see that trade go down, like, yeah, I would have declined my offer as well. So Sweat goes to the Bears. Chase Young goes to the 49ers, who are just in desperate need of just, something to kind of wake them up, something to create. I don't know. They're just in desperate need of something. And whether that can be fixed with a defensive coordinator who's under a lot of fire right now. And I'm not saying Chase Young is some world beater, but their defense right now is underachieving. And they hung their hat on being one of the more physical teams in the NFL, and they simply are not. NBA fans, the wait is over. Basketball is back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is celebrating with an unbeatable offer. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for throwing down $5 on the NBA. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. You'll start the season with an instant dub. And with DraftKings parlays, everyone's got a shot at even bigger basketball wins. String together multiple bets from the same game or build your parlay across multiple games for a shot at making your payday even sweeter. Basketball's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code JOHN. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly for betting just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Now, Washington is basically waving the white flag, which they should. Their team for the last several years has just been in the middle of nowhere. Like, unlike the Bears, the Bears suck. So you understand when they draft one and then the following year they draft two, you're like, yeah, they're terrible. You watch them play. They have like two or three players you would want. This year, one of the players literally just came from another team, DJ Moore. They don't have, you watch Washington, you're like, God, I like a lot of their players. Got wide receivers, got a running back I like. The tight end, kind of interesting, former quarterback, clearly defensive line-wise, pretty good. You just got two guys that netted you a pick 34 and a third-round pick. But for whatever reason, it's just not going anywhere. And maybe part of that, offensively the last couple of years, you add Sam Howell, who's actually not bad. To me, when I watched him play the other day, I'm like, I see this kind of version of Baker, a guy that ideally is probably your backup quarterback, that if he has to start a month because your quarterback has a high ankle sprain and your team's good, like you can win several games. But if he has to start all throughout the season, you're probably going to be in some trouble. The other thing that's hurting them is Eric Bieniemy, everyone's been banging on the table for him to become a head coach, became an offensive coordinator, and he passes it nonstop. I mean, Sam Howell is on record, or at least was going into last game, to break David Carr's single-season sack rate. Like, there's a balance of, and listen, I'm pro passing the ball. Hell, I wish Kyle Shanahan would throw the ball more. Andy Reid's rattling off Super Bowls, throwing the rock. But sometimes you got to run the ball. And when your quarterback is getting fucking killed, it might be smart to call a different play. And the Eric Bieniemy experiment is not going well. The Ron Rivera experiment is not going well. Now, there are rumors out there in football streets that Josh Harris is so over-leveraged that it's going to be difficult for him to pay off Ron. Here's the thing. If he hires a new coach, he's not going to want to hire some cheap guy. He's not going to try to go Dean Spanos and get a guy on the cheap. I would imagine he's going to want to go big game hunting, and it'll be very interesting. Now, if I had to guess, Rivera gets fired, maybe Mayhew gets fired as well, and I think Bill Belichick actually would be in play there if he were to have a breakup with the Patriots. I could see him also sniffing around Jim Harbaugh, but both those guys are expensive. So if it is truly he's super over leveraged to buy this team and just doesn't have, millions upon millions of liquid cash on hand, it's going to be interesting how that plays out. But they trade two of their better players, and their team was kind of defined. It's why they gave Philly so much trouble over the years. What does Philly hang their hat on? We got the best offensive line in the league. We can shove you around. Well, they're the one team, like physically, like, let's go to war. Let's make this thing interesting. If our offense just plays half decent, we're going to be in the game. And now you trade those guys away. Like, that's kind of the identity and the ethos of the team. So I think we all sell stock on a team. I always like, what am I going to call them? No team has more names that you have to like think before you say the Washington Football Command Redskin. It's like, and this guy's already claiming he refuses to wear the Commanders logo. People already think he's going to rename the team. Another big story today, and we mentioned it up front, like, if I was the Raiders, I would entertain trading Davante Adams. What's the point of having Davante Adams with no quarterback? Like, at least having Max Crosby, he's not dependent on anyone else. And I think Max Crosby, just because they played on prime time a couple games, if you just watch half a game of football, you go, there can't be right now this season 10 guys, non-quarterbacks, playing better than him. The energy, the effort, the motor, just the pure physical talent. He's fucking dominating. But he could dominate. The best part about having a good defensive lineman, even coaches can't screw you up because it's just mano a mano. It's 3rd and 7, chase the quarterback. 1st and 10, and you get the run look, play the run. It's coming to you, shed that guy, make a tackle. And he's doing it nonstop. But Davante Adams can run the best routes in the NFL, can run these, double moves, goes, posts, flags. He can be open all day long. If Jimmy Garoppolo can't hit water when he's sitting in a boat, none of it matters. None of it matters. So keeping a guy like that just to keep him, especially a year more into the contract, he's a little bit older this offseason, there would have been teams. Now, they would never trade with the Kansas City Chiefs, a divisional team, but I think with ease they could have got a first-round pick. Where are they going anyway? Like, what's the point? And listen, I have a lot of respect for Davante Adams. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he said those comments a couple weeks ago, and he kind of talked after the game like it wasn't even worth saying something that would get taken out of context. He chose this. He chose the Raiders, right? I mean, Saquon Barkley ultimately was drafted to the Giants and then franchised. Like, he hasn't even got a choice, right? Josh Jacobs, hell, drafted the Raiders, franchise, can't go anywhere. Davante Adams, the Packers, who I got no problem wanting to leave a team. what James Harden's doing is an embarrassment to professional sports. Every other year, quits on a team, demands a trade. Davante Adams has been a good, high character, great player. Finally realized, like, I'm not dealing with this Aaron Rodgers. I want to get a trade. I've said over and over. If you just say, hey, trade me to somewhere good, like Tyreek Hill, traded to Miami Dolphins, wanted to go to Miami, but was open to go other places, goes there, is winning, right? Davante's like, I only want to go to the Raiders. I only want to go to the Raiders. It's like, Davante, have you seen this franchise? And I kind of understand it with Derek Carr, but then to pretend to be happy this offseason before the season starts when you're playing with Jimmy Garoppolo, who is clearly playing the worst football of his career, who looks just horrendous. I have no sympathy. I really don't. Not that he's asking for it. He's making whatever, $25 million a year, but hell, maybe even more than that. I think it's like $29 million a year. But it sucks. When you're an athlete, especially a football player, in the prime of your career at wide receiver, it just doesn't last forever, right? He doesn't have 10 more years playing at this level. Hell, he might not have 5 more years left playing at this level. So every year that you waste playing on a team that can't even begin to get you the football has no chance to win when you signed up for that, to me, feels crazy. The Minnesota Vikings, I respect it. I think they had a couple options, right? They could go the guys on the street. They could call up Carson Wentz. They could call up Matt Ryan in the booth. Doesn't make any sense. Those guys have been on ice all season. They didn't have an off season. They haven't been anywhere in training camp. Both, obviously, Matt Ryan shot. Carson Wentz, I don't care how many routes he throws in the morning, wherever he's living right now, it's not the same as the NFL. They could have sniffed around the backup quarterback players, right? Sam Darnold, just look around the NFL. But those guys haven't been playing. So you'd be taking a guy who hasn't played any snaps and just inserting him on a team who has a pretty good shot at competing for a wild card. Or they could do what they did. And they got Joshua Dobbs, who, listen, we can debate all day long. Is he any good? Was his production early in the season a little overrated? Listen, he's proven a couple things. You can throw him in to a shit sandwich, and he can attempt to make a chicken salad. Because you watched him early this season, that team is not very talented. And he was just had them competing. Last year, when he goes to the Titans at the end of the season, just a debacle quarterback situation, comes in. To me, his greatest strength, beside everyone says super high character guy, well-liked leader, is he's very adaptable. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm not that adaptable always. It takes me a minute. I can't do it at the snap of the finger. I've actually really, really worked interpersonally on being more just open-minded to just things, right? When something happens, being able to pivot. You can't operate on a daily basis like you're a fucking Marine in normal society. Every minute, you know exactly what you're going to do. That's not how the world works. And a lot of football players, because football is very regimented, don't pivot and don't change very easily. Coaches are like that. They do not adapt that well on the fly. It's hard. It is very difficult. But this guy has proven that you can just throw him into a situation that's not ideal, that is undermanned, and he can just figure out a way to at least look competent and have the team kind of moving in the right direction. We see over and over and over again, you put these like backup level players, even when they've been playing, it's like, yeah, this can't go on, right? You're seeing it with Baker Mayfield, who has proven he's a backup quarterback. And there's nothing wrong with that. Baker, it's why when Colin had that, his off season or like during August, he thought Baker should just retire. I'm like, hey, no matter what he does in the pros, it'll never hurt his brand once he works for Fox doing college football. RG3 was an embarrassment. He's calling games now. Matt Leinart is an all-time bust. He's like one of the stars of the network. None of that shit, Brady Quinn, impacts what you did in the NFL on your brand off the field, especially when you deal with college, right? And when you look at Joshua Dobbs, like you look at some of these guys, I would have gone with him too. It doesn't cost much, right? You're not just going to roll with the rookie full time. It's too risky. Like you don't want to just wave the white flag on the season. But you also have to kind of come to grips with it's not worth trying to maybe overpay for a guy. Well, I think they traded a 6 for Dobbs and a 7th. Like that's an easy deal when your quarterback is currently in a hospital bed with a torn Achilles. And like I said on yesterday's podcast, that is going to have major ripple effects in the NFL, not just on Minnesota in their franchise, but the countless other teams that would have been very, very interested in signing Kirk Cousins this offseason. I've said Atlanta. I think Green Bay Packers. I think a lot of teams would have sniffed around just because if you get Kirk Cousins, like, you can just make the playoffs. And there's something to be said about being a playoff team. Why? Your stadium's full. People are talking about you. You are just relevant. When you're just a 5 or 6 win team, nobody cares about you. Think about when you're watching a game on the weekend and you get two teams, especially as the season goes on, that are like 2-8 versus 3-7. You're not likely to give that game much time. It's just not worth it, right? You just like, I'll watch 2 playoff teams, or I'll watch a playoff team against a random team. And I respect Minnesota because everyone, probably including myself, thought they were just going to take the season. Cousins refused to let that happen. And then he goes down, and they're still trying. And that's, I think, a separating factor in the NFL than a lot of these other sports where tanking is just really in vogue. And I got news for you as a fan. That's what I am first. I'm a fan of sports. Tanking has a lot of just negative ramifications. The NBA is greatly diminished over the last 10 years. They've lost so much of their audience. You ask the casual, just sports fan, I would say they're kind of down on it. And I think a huge reason has to do with tanking, which has ultimately kind of led to this resting. They're all kind of intertwined. And the NFL doesn't have to battle that. And even teams that, like, it would be understandable if Minnesota just had a fire sale today, but they go the other way. They're like, we're going to try to compete for the next month and see what happens. Respect it. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for just $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already love, like Netflix and NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. Just go to Verizon.com/plusplay to bundle and save on Netflix and NFL Plus today for a limited time only. A couple other little trades. The Bills trade for Rasul Douglas. They obviously needed defensive help. They lose White for the season. I think he tears Achilles or ACL. I forget the exact injury, but that's a pretty easy trade. I think they get Douglas in a 5th, and they trade a 5th, or a 3rd. The Bills are a fascinating team. Is this team still a Super Bowl contender with the injuries that they have on defense? It's hard to tell. They obviously have a Super Bowl level. I know he has to prove it, but the talent's there to be a Super Bowl level quarterback. And offensively, when they're on, their firepower is definitely there. But defensively, you saw early in the season when they played Miami, their ceiling was really high. Their ceiling was as high as any team in the league, including Philly, including the Niners, including the Chiefs, including the Ravens. We saw them play the Dolphins, and they curb stomped them. That ceiling's not quite the same once you lose a star corner and you lose a star linebacker. Especially when you lose a star middle linebacker, it's a lot like losing a catcher or something in baseball. It's not just the guy's a productive player, makes a lot of tackles, can cover. It's like he kind of gets everyone set up. He calms everyone down. Part of when you get these mic'd up segments in football and you see the huddle, it's more sometimes than just calling the play, right? Whatever. Razor left, foxtrot, Y stick, left razor, right? You say that, and then like, hey guys, let's take a deep breath. We're fine. Or you just, the quarterback looks at the wide receiver after a drop. Like, James, we're good, bro. Keep your head up. I'm fine. I'm going to come right back to you. Right? There's a confidence attribute that the green dot guy, the quarterback, and the middle linebacker bring to the table. And losing Milano, who obviously is a fantastic player, it's very, very difficult. It's why we saw for years when Kuechly would go out. I'm not saying he's as good as Kuechly, but like if Fred Warner went out for the Niners, they would be screwed. So he's essentially their number 2 quarterback. He just happens to play on defense with his leadership, with his communication. And I'm rooting for, I'm a Josh Allen fan. I've known Sean McDermott for a long time. I'm rooting for that franchise. I love the fan base. I love how much people care about football. They're just going to be a fascinating case study Are they just going to be like a one and done this year, or are they just going to be a legit contender? I think we'll learn a lot about them over the next month. And I think it's going to start with they need Josh Allen to go nuclear. They need him to go, Tom Brady, what Roethlisberger did kind of in his peak, Peyton Manning. Like, I'm the best fucking player in the league. That's how they need him to be 90% of the time, right? If they want to get to win the division, if they want to compete in the playoffs, it's always started and ended with him, but he had the benefit of the doubt when his defense was a little better. Now, to me, the margin is much smaller. The Jags get Ezra Cleveland. I'd be lying if I have a scouting report on him. Clearly, he's just a plug-and-play starter at guard. You look for offensive line help. That's a little move Minnesota made, probably because they knew they weren't going to re-sign him. But I think the Jags, like the Bills, like that's think about those two teams, right? Coming into the season in the AFC, I always pick the Kansas City Chiefs until they've proven otherwise. I think even if you didn't have the Bengals right behind them, you watched the Bengals last week, you're like, they should be right behind them. The Ravens are playing well. The Bills, like you would have had kind of that group. And I don't think you would have had the Jags in it, right? Kind of one, not a one-hit wonder because they do have a young nucleus and a really good young quarterback and Super Bowl winning coach. But you went like, I think the Jags could be, most normal people pick them to win the division. And it was like, I think the Jags would be good. Now you look up, they're 6-2. They just went into Pittsburgh in an ugly game and won a grimy level game that like the Ravens and the Steelers and the Bengals win. They win it. If they can play like that, like you got to put them in the Bills, Chiefs. Like, is this team to be reckoned with? They're on a bye. They're playing the 49ers coming off a bye. That's a massive game for the 49ers. They beat the 49ers coming off a bye. I think we might have to start talking about the Jags as like, I don't want to say Super Bowl contenders, but definitely in the AFC Championship mix. I mean, they might be a game or two away from being like, yeah, maybe this team could compete to win the Super Bowl. Other than that, trade deadline, man. It's a lot of hype. We still, you got to be on your toes, unlike, 10, 20 years ago, because of the aggressive GMs in the NFL now, which is enjoyable. Before, forever, a move here, a move there. Now, even when it's quote unquote underwhelming or doesn't quite live up to the hype, you have to be ready. And kudos to all these young, aggressive GMs, in their 40s, in their early 50s, that are just willing to try things, willing to take big swings, willing to do deals. It makes the league more entertaining. And I want to tell you something about my friends at Uber Eats. It's time for this week's player I thought might give almost anything to redo his game. Brought to you by Uber Eats. Now, I don't think we're going to pick a player that would redo his game from last weekend, which would be easy. I think Purdy would like some of those picks back. Obviously, PJ Walker would like a pass back. I think this is the players. Look at Jalen Johnson, who was given the right to explore a trade. And the best part about the NFL, like when you see the NBA, I want to be traded. That guy always gets traded. It's just kind of baffling sometimes. Like, why are you doing this? Like, just play it out. Like the player doesn't have all the control. In the NFL, it's the complete opposite. Like, I want to trade. Yeah, go seek it. And if you don't come back with anything we remotely like, we're just going to hang up the phone. You're going to be at practice tomorrow. And that's what happens with guys like Jalen Johnson. Like, I want to trade. You're not paying me enough. Like, okay. Yeah, we'll see you practice on Wednesday. That always happens. And I at least respect them being open-minded to trade the guy. I do not understand. And I know he had a really good game the other day. It's not like Derrick Henry's going to be on this team long. It's not like Saquon Barkley is going to be on this team. I would be stunned for the next 4 or 5 years. Why would you not entertain trading these players? And I think the hard part is, and this is where owners get involved, those two players, for example, like Jalen Johnson, ultimately, if he was traded or not today, Bears fans would forget about him in 3 weeks. I like the player. I'm rooting for the player. He's a Valley guy, California, but you went to Utah. It's not Deion Sanders. But I think when you get Derrick Henry, who is just, let's face it, might get a statue built out in front of their new stadium, and Saquon Barkley, who the owners view as like the Eli Manning of running backs for their team, it's very, very difficult to trade a guy, especially when you're having a down season, that helps get butts in the seats, that help keep your team. And when you're going to these luncheons and these rich people parties, that's who they talk about. And I think sometimes that can be a mistake. And I just wonder if some of these teams, like Titans, get their butt kicked on Thursday. Is that something you regret? And I understand, like, what, we're just going to trade them for a a fourth that could turn into a third. What's the point of that? We might as well just keep him. Well, you're going to let him walk for nothing. It's not like anyone's going to pay him. I would always, and the Rams are a good example. It was almost like, oh, the Rams actually are pretty good. Oh, actually, they stink. They're really not very good. And now Stafford is injured. And the quarterback that they drafted in the 4th or 5th round, Stetson Bennett, who knows where he is. So you're not going to win any games. And Aaron Donald, of all these players, is why last week I predicted a player would go for a first-round pick. Because I thought a name like him on a team that kind of clearly came to grips with, yeah, we're not that good. Give us a 1, 2 2s, and a 3. I mean, something like, I don't think Aaron Donald at 32 gets you multiple ones, but he definitely gets you a 1 and more. And for a team that is clearly hitting the reset button, who's more likely to draft 10th than they are 18th, I just think that might have been the right move. To have multiple first-round picks, to be able to reset your franchise, to get the money off the books. But again, like I said with those other players, a lot like the owners, it's just very hard to trade your most famous player. The player that when you walk into the stadium is on all the billboards. The player who more than likely is going to go, like Derrick Henry and definitely Aaron Donald, go into the Hall of Fame wearing your jersey. But that's what makes good GMs, and that's what makes average GMs and owners, right? Belichick, Walsh, like they were willing to do stuff like that. Hell, Andy Reid traded Tyreek Hill last year and then won the freaking Super Bowl. It helped change their franchise, making that trade. And I know it was the offseason. It's different in the middle of the season, but still. That was this week's Almost Anything Players of the Week. And you can order almost anything with Uber Eats, the official on-demand partner of the NFL. Order now